So the next thing I needed to do was modify the transmission dust shield. I only have one for an automatic, and I thought it would be easy enough just to go ahead and cut it up and make it fit. So I cut the shape out of cardboard, and this bottom piece is what it's missing to make it a manual. See where I've cut it out? So I thought it'd be cool to use a license plate. It'd be cool, kind of like a rat rod thing. Nobody will ever see it, but I think it's so cool that it's going to be down there, and I like that it has the handicap sticker on it and stuff, so that's pretty cool. So I took the shield over to my brother's house, and he was really nice to get out his grinder and cut it up and get that all squared away so that we can cut out the piece that might not have been necessary, but I wanted it to match what the manual transmission shield is supposed to look like. If you look at this shield here, you can see it has a whole bunch of holes and things in it, and it takes up, half of the bell housing there. Now, the manual transmission one actually looks a lot different. It's basically bare except for the very, very bottom part, and that's kind of a dust shield spot. So you do have the spot for the starter there, and it's kind of shimmed just right, so I wanted to make sure that that was all there instead of just eliminating the whole plate, and I think it turned out pretty nicely. So next I moved on to a harness that needed some repair. I had 3 different harnesses that were for the battery terminal cables that go over to the starter and some other things, and they were missing these little pieces here, but this cable was cut, and so I pieced them together, and I got the piece I needed. Then I made this bracket here so that I could have the chains on the back and front of the block and not have to take off the intake manifold, and then be able to use the equalizer bar here to drop the engine in, and that will give clearance so you don't crack that plastic intake manifold when the chains are on the back side of the engine. So a few days have gone by, and I've been really wanting to get this out and get it into the car, and I pulled the engine out, and I couldn't do the pilot bearing or the pressure plate and flywheel and all that stuff until I got it on the engine hoist and got it outside and everything. So I moved the red Terminator outside and got everything going. So here's where the new pilot bearing is going to go. So if you're going from an automatic to a manual transmission, you need to add a pilot bearing, and so it's really not that hard. I put it in the freezer for over an hour just to get it nice and cold, and that shrinks the metal down a little bit, contracts it, and makes it easier to tap in. So then I just tapped the new pilot bearing in. So that's the nice thing about getting an engine that was an automatic. You don't have to take the old pilot bearing out. Just tap the new one in. It's ready to go. I did clean it up inside there with some Scotch-Brite before I did this. So this is the back of the crankshaft is what you're tapping into. So I used a socket that was about the same size of the rim of the pilot bearing, so you don't damage anything.
I said garter, huh?
It's going in, yeah.
Going in.
Pilot bearing for the stick shift. So next I was ready to put the flywheel on, and this is different than the pressure plate that was on there from the automatic. And I went through and I put all the bolts in, made sure they fit because they only go one way. You might have to turn it a few times to get it to line up right. But once I got them all in and got them all snug, I brought them all out and then put the Loctite on them and torqued them down to the 60 foot-pounds that is recommended. I did the star pattern, and as soon as I was done with each one, I put some azure blue touch-up paint that I had. That just helps me know which ones I torqued down, make sure I didn't miss anything. So now with that ready to go, I cleaned the flywheel with a microfiber towel and some brake cleaner, so that gets everything all ready to go for the clutch disc and the alignment tool. So I put that in, and yeah, it'd probably be a little bit better if it wasn't on a slight slope, but the clutch disc felt very nice against that flywheel. And this is the pressure plate, and it needs to go on and be torqued down as well. Everything seemed like it was going on nicely, so I was happy about that, and I did use some Loctite on those bolts as well and torqued them down to the 24 foot-pounds, I believe is what it was, to get those in. And of course you do the crisscross pattern, and that went on nicely. So I was just happy to not forget that pilot bearing in there, because you get the whole engine in and then realize that you forgot something, you'd be pretty upset. And I even put an extra pilot bearing I had on top of the flywheel on my toolbox to make sure that I didn't forget it. So this was exciting, getting a lot closer here. And now I have everything lined up. I pulled the alignment tool out. Everything seemed to be just right, and everything was where it needed to go. Now I have the modified dust shield that I had made, and I hung it on the dowel pins where it goes on each side, and that went on nicely. And I'm going to leave the bottom part off till later because I can just add that with the 2 bolts on the bottom when I want, that new license plate piece. Next, I just dragged the transmission over on the piece of carpet that I had, and I lowered the engine enough that I could get the transmission right behind it pretty close. The oil pan was almost touching the ground, and then I just got the transmission right where it needed to be and straddled it and just lifted it right on, trying not to touch the input shaft on the diaphragm fingers of the clutch or let it rest or bend anything. Just lifted it right on and got it onto those dowel pins, and so that went on pretty nicely. And I wiggled it around. I put the drive shaft on the back and turned it to make sure that the splines lined up. Everything was smooth, and then as I started to run some of the bolts in, it helped pull it together. Now, you're not supposed to do that and forcefully do that. It's just something that mine was ready to go, and once I had the dowel pins on and started snugging down those bolts, it just pulled it the remainder of the way together, and it went nicely. So very happy about that. And then I just got the rest of the bolts in here, and I hand selected them because I have several. Some of them are kind of rounded off, and that's why I just have a whole bunch of extras, but I just made sure I got the right sizes. The ones on the dowel pins are longer than the rest of them. So here's the engine ready to go, mated to the transmission. You can see I have the drive shaft there on the back, and everything turned nicely. I touched the clutch fork against the diaphragm fingers and everything. It all went smoothly, and I did put on the pivot ball and throw-out bearing, and I put new grease and everything on there. Really nice. Cobra looking great. Is an awesome view while I'm working. Can't even say how that does not do justice how good the car looks when you're standing there working. Next, I wanted to take the clutch cable out. I thought this would be a great time to do it. You can obviously do it while it's in the car, but you can see this one is messed up from the previous owner. It was starting to fray, so I unbolted it and everything and got that out of the way. And I had a couple to choose from. I brought over here, and I had quite a few of them, but you can see how bad this one was, just everywhere. And the throw-out bearing was kind of bad too, so it definitely needed that. I put an engine in by myself a couple of times, but I thought it'd be nice to have some help, and I asked my brother if he could help me, and so he was nice enough to come over and help, and my mom came over too, and she just wanted to help out, and she's worked on airplanes with my dad and stuff when they ran a flight school, so she's really good about helping out and getting her hands dirty, so that was really nice of her to help as well. She held the hood. We tried to take the hood off, but it started to pull the studs out of the hood, so I just thought we'll just hold the hood straight up and we'll do this. So that was good of her, and she could also watch for harnesses as well. So thought I'd just kind of play a little bit of how this went so you can hear it for yourself.
Okay, let's just start maybe lowering it or something. Okay, let's just get the. In fact, this is the point where you almost don't want it on the back at all.
Yeah.
This might not be just enough. Okay.
Let me bring it down just a hair. Yeah. And then we can start equalizing it a little more.
Yeah.
Okay, let's watch. Yeah, keep the lines up. Clutch cable.
Okay, hold on a sec.
Doing good?
Yeah,
I think
there
we're
you
doing
go.
good.
Yeah. We're about to hit the brake master cylinder though.
Okay. So should I equalizer for it?
Well, you can't. Yeah, you got enough room on the tunnel, but we're kind of rubbing this brake master cylinder. We don't want to hit.
So we can,
Yeah. Okay. I think you. Yeah. I think we just start lowering it down.
lower it or equalizer? You need to lower. Where are the whoops? Okay. Motor mount, exhaust manifold, there. Yeah, right there.
Okay, hold up.
Hey, how are you? Reinforcement. Their friend came over. It was really nice of him to help. And with my brother and him both kind of rocking the engine back just slightly, it got the motor mounts to go right in where they needed to go. And it dropped in smoothly. And he was like, wow, that was really good. That went right in. And I was like, yeah, well, this ain't my first rodeo. We got this in here just right, and I had done a lot of prep work to make sure it went smoothly and got the chains and the brackets and everything set up nicely so it would do well. So very happy about how that all turned out, and it was nice of my friends and my mom to come over and help, just kind of have a bunch of extra eyes and hands to look for things, make sure no wires got pinched or the harness or anything, make sure the brake booster didn't get broken, make sure the oil pressure sensor didn't break off. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but it was nice to have everyone there, and we worked it in there very nicely and just didn't, worry about it too much. Take your time, go slow. When you try to just drop it in there and get it in as fast as you can, you end up breaking things. And so this turned out very well, and it was one of the better times I've had putting one in. It just kind of went right into place. I did jack the back of the car up higher, got the angles right, and that was just something I tried. I did that with my Bullet years ago, and it worked out nicely. And just the way I had it set up with this extra little harness bar on the back, I think that worked out nicely, but that's just the way I chose to do it, so I wouldn't have to take the intake manifold off and then reinstall it, because the gaskets were already there, everything was bolted down and torqued right, and it wasn't leaking or anything. So I just wanted to drop that engine and drivetrain, transmission in and get it all done. So it turned out very nicely. Very happy about it. Now it's at one of my favorite times, is where all you got to do is just start plugging things in, fill up the fluids, and get ready to start it. So that's the update for the Zinc Yellow GT. It's looking really awesome. I just love going over and lifting up the hood and looking in there and seeing an engine in there. So looks great. I'm happy about that. I did also replace the throttle cable. The other one was fraying. Luckily, I did have one of those that I got from a wrecking yard as well. And I have some hoses and stuff coming on the way for the heater core. So got some things I need before I can start it, but it's looking really good. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more Mustang content.